May the peace of our brother Jesus be with you all.
And also with you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to the disciples, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn and offer the other as well. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And if anyone presses you into service for 1 mile, offer to go a 2nd mile as well. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. In this way, you will be children of your loving God. For God causes the sun to rise on the good as well as the evil, and causes rain to fall on the honest and dishonest alike. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Even the tax collectors do as much. And if you greet only your family and loved ones, what more are you doing than others? Even the Gentiles do as much. You must be perfect, just as the Holy One is perfect." The good news of our salvation, spoken through Matthew. Good morning.
Good morning.
As many of you know, my name is Cathy Heying, and even after 22 years of membership and at least 10 homilies, it remains an honor to stand before you in this particular way. I had mixed feelings when I was asked to give this homily because the second reading talks about God is not convinced by the arguments of the wise, so I thought, well, there's hope for me then. So that made me want to do it, but then in the gospel where it talks about do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you, I knew that I would never hear the end of this from Adam. So, and that would give him fodder. So it all balanced out, and here we are. Today's readings are filled with so many good and challenging ideas that it would be difficult to adequately dive into all of them, so I'm going to largely focus on the gospel. Brian Andreas is a writer and artist, mostly known for his story people art. One of my favorite pieces of wisdom from him is this: deciding that everything is falling into place perfectly, as long as you don't get too picky about what you mean by place. Or perfectly. Perfection is a dangerous standard, especially when compared to God's perfection, and when we define perfection by current human practice. I don't think we can take this to mean without fail or without sin. When digging deeper, the Greek word that is used here can mean perfection, but is more often used to mean complete or undivided. And Luke's interpretation is, be merciful as your God is merciful. And this is the kind of love that I believe we are being called to. Undivided. Not different love for different people, but complete, merciful love for all. We are being asked to love like God loves. Period. No comparison, no judgment, just love. I was actually thinking about this recently as I was shoveling snow at the lift garage. The city requires that all businesses have their sidewalks shoveled to the pavement and edge to edge within 4 hours of the snowfall ending. We are on Lake Street with very busy sidewalks that get packed down quickly. And we have failed at meeting this requirement at times, and recently got a letter warning us about it. So I was out there with a chipper clearing the packed snow to the pavement when I stopped to take a breath. I I looked down the sidewalk at the Arby's next door. Their sidewalks were terrible, and there seemed to be no movement to improve them. I started fuming inside. Did they get a letter? Because even before I came out here, ours were way better than theirs. Why is the city being so hard on us? Don't they know what good we're doing? Especially compared to Arby's, who's a big corporate evil giant who can afford to hire someone to do their sidewalks. Why can't the city give us a break? And then I started to laugh at myself, and I thought, this was the exact kind of negotiation that I do with God all the time. I'm way better than that person. Doesn't God see how much good I am doing? Why can't I get a break? Other people are way worse. But we are not being called to be like our neighbor. We are being called to be like God. And on the way to the completeness of biblical perfection, we are still being asked to do really hard things like turn the other cheek, walk an extra mile, give them my shirt and coat. I used to struggle with this passage, not only because it feels nearly impossible to do, but because of how I often interpreted it as passive. It seems like Jesus is asking us to collaborate with our oppressor, to be nice. It has often been used to suggest that people continually forgive their abusers or that slaves must love their masters. But Walter Wink's exegesis helped me understand that Jesus was really calling us to bold acts of nonviolent resistance here. Jesus is not telling us to submit to evil, but to oppose it on its own terms. Wink says that Jesus is calling us to a third way, a way to respond that is neither passive nor violent. In reality, Jesus was not nice. Not in the ways that we often use that word. Be nice. Don't make waves. Don't upset things. He was compassionate, kind, and loving, but not necessarily nice. In Jesus' time, the left hand was used only for unclean tasks, and those caught gesturing with their left hand could be excluded from community and subjected to penance. So to slap someone on the right cheek, the oppressor would have to use their right backhand. Turning the other cheek then would mean that the backhand with the right hand would be impossible, leaving the oppressor three options: use the left hand and face consequences, not follow through with the attack, or use a closed fist, which was only used in fights with equals. So doing that would connote the idea that the oppressor and oppressed are equals. Similarly, nakedness was a shameful thing, but not so much for those who were naked in public, but rather for those who looked upon the nakedness. If you give your enemy your shirt and your cloak, you will be naked and bring shame upon your oppressor. Finally, Roman law allowed that soldiers could require people to carry their pack 1 mile, but no more. Carrying it a second mile was an infraction of military law, and the soldier could very well face repercussions. In all of these, Jesus is not only giving us a powerful way to respond, but is also creating a way for the oppressor to change. Hopefully, when we call out oppressors by making them publicly uncomfortable, they take notice. This resistance, in this upside-down world of Jesus's, is a way to love our enemy by nonviolently calling them to their better selves. John Donahue, a Jesuit New Testament professor, says, virtually no Christian group has adopted Jesus' teaching on love of enemy as the critical test of orthodoxy. Yet Jesus issues 4 ringing commands: love your enemy, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. Imagine if this was the orthodoxy that we adhered to daily. Imagine that in loving our enemies, we are engaging in more than just an emotion, but in a fundamental approach that seeks only good for that person and responds to his or her needs. Imagine a daily orthodoxy that found us not only on our knees in prayer for those who have hurt us, but acting in profound love to actively meet their needs and help move them to healing. Imagine a daily orthodoxy in which the many we have hurt not only pray for us, but come to us in a merciful love to help us toward healing and wholeness. Perfection. This year, our prayer focus is about both contemplation and action. This is the last Sunday in Ordinary Time before Lent begins. The stories we have heard recently are about Jesus teaching the disciples with his words. Moving into the 40 days of Lent, we will hear much more about Jesus teaching the disciples with his actions of revolutionary nonviolence through profound love of his friends and his enemies. He will not hesitate to push back boldly on the corruption of the empire, but he will also engage in a love that believes in the goodness and possibility that lies within his accusers. My friends, my beloved community, this is hard work. As disciples, we have chosen to throw our lot in with a God who asks the seemingly impossible. But our God does not ask us to do what she is unwilling to do herself. So let us go into each day embracing profound love of God, of neighbor, of enemy, and ourselves. And as the fruit of our contemplation, may we act. Amen.